Hello.
When your mind is.
Is it safe?
Is it
Is it
safe?
safe? Sorry, I'm quoting Laurence Olivier.
I was
I'm
about to say,
quoting Laurence
Graham,
Olivier in The Marathon Man.
the Marathon Man to
Yes,
Dustin.
it's 1976.
Yeah, to Dustin
Yeah, in
Hoffman.
1976 film. Exactly, yeah. Anyway,
Of
Merry
course,
Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas. Of course, the great story behind that is that Laurence Olivier was getting fed up with Hoffman and his method acting,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and eventually snapped and just said to Hoffman, "It'd be a lot easier, dear boy, if you just acted."
Well, supposedly the guy who plays Kenton in Succession, that brilliant TV series with Brian Cox as the media mogul, he's so method that when they're falling off set the whole time and at home, he never stops being Kenton.
Well, good evening, Graham. And I am Charles Hutchinson, a co host of Two Big Egos in a Small Car podcast with my co host, Graham Chalmers. Graham can introduce himself now.
Well, I'm Gigs and being the ex Harrogate Festival Fringe director and, being on stage with gruff rhesus for animals, but I'm not going to bother. Instead,
Oh.
I'm going to straight into a moment of pride for both you and me because we got an annual report from our host provider for the podcast.
Oh, yes.
It was
Thank you,
right,
our host provider.
which revealed a stunning achievement that our listening figures for 2023 rose by 524%, which
They did.
I think you'll agree that's an absolutely staggering figure, unless, of course, we only had 5 listeners in the first place.
Yeah, I feel that we mustn't deflect from that huge increase in listenership. And the only thing that alarmed me, Graham, more, I think if I read it correctly, there's definitely more listeners in America than there are in York. And I don't know what that says about.
Well, yeah, bizarrely, Charles, we're listened to in 22 countries.
We are
Or
listened
rather,
to in 22 countries.
yeah, there's been downloads in 22 countries. I mean, I know we're good, but I didn't realize we were that good.
No, well, it doesn't half flutter the two big egos. I think the small car might not be big enough any longer. We might
Could we
need a
actually rename it to,
524% larger car.
yep, or rename it to Gigantic Egos?
That's the one. That's the one. So, Graham, I want to start tonight. Well, because we're thinking about Christmas, and your Christmas presents are possibly the best arts-related presents anyone got this year, anywhere on the planet, and very well worth. I want present by present, Graham.
Huh?
Past, present, and well, maybe a future in present giving, because you can become the taster, the taste guide to Christmas. Given that obviously you are arts related presents, you are the very essence of that. And first question, really though, on that, Graham, is were these presents that you suggested, or actually do people just think you're such a Mr. Arts that they reflect your character impeccably?
It's a mix of both, I do suggest. But I'd also like to say that I'm not going to go through every single present because A,
No.
that'd be very long, and also be
No.
very tedious. But I got my usual mix of books, Blu-rays, and CDs.
Yeah.
And I'll briefly go through some of the highlights because I know that you want to hear about this, and I'm sure listeners in America, etc., also want to hear about my Christmas presents. But number one, a great book just come by
Yeah.
Laura Freeman called Ways of Life, Jim Eddy and the Kettle Yard Artists, and it's on University of Cambridge Press. And it's about Kettle's Yard's where I met the famous Chinese artist Wei Wei last year.
Mm.
And Kettle's Yard was just a house of the man Jim Eddy, who was a massive arts buff from the 20s to the 70s.
Mm.
And he also wrote the book of Savage Messiah, which Ken Russell turned into a film in 1972, which is partly filmed at Kettle's Yard at the house owned by Jim Eddy, who him and his wife are friends with Ben Nicholson and Winifred Nicholson, Henry Moore, Barbara Hepworth, the whole crew house, and they give them artworks. And so eventually their home became like an art gallery and a museum of its own that they lived in. And they'd invite University of Cambridge students round to see it. And eventually University of Cambridge bought the house off them and then built an extra gallery next to it, which is where I bumped into Wei Wei last year. And it's a great book. I haven't read a lot of it yet, but I had a look at it and it looks like a really fascinating book. Obviously, I got politics on the edge because it's former Tory cabinet minister Rory Stewart dissecting and decimating his own government. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's political books this year, as opposed to Nadine Dorris's Losing the Plot, or did I add an extra word to that title?
Yeah, well, Rory always seemed to be too intelligent and nice to be in the current version of the Tory party. A bit like when I met Amber Rudd for the Harrogate Advertiser a few years back, and she also seemed to be in the wrong party when I was chatting to her.
What does that tell you about politics then? What does it say that intelligence and actually not having a vicious, nasty streak, that might be simplifying it. What does that tell you, that you've met two politicians who had qualities that I suspect people like to think they go into politics with, and yet they're stripped away from them, denuded, bit by bit?
Well, we're living in an era where extreme ideas get a lot more currency than middle of the road ideas. So therefore, if you're middle of the road, you're going to get shunted aside, which happened to Labour Party politicians when Corbyn was in charge. One shade of bad leader ever. They're in a much deeper mess politically than Labour or Lib Dems, I would suggest.
The other hit, of course, for Rory Stewart this year, obviously not as successful as Two Big Egos in a Small Car as a podcast, but has been his podcast with Alistair Campbell, of course, which The Rest is Politics, part of the Gary Lineker chain of podcasts. And so have you listened to that yet?
Yeah, I've had a listen. It's very good, and they both know their stuff. They know their stuff better than I do, because I've never been in government. So, but I did meet Alistair Campbell once to interview him for the Harrogate Advertiser, and his views on politics didn't seem to be, that's current politics, not on politics when he was Blair's right-hand man.
Spinning it
New
like
Labour.
plates.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Given the populist touch with the press. But his views on current politics didn't seem to be any more incisive or deeply thought than my own. I was quite surprised. I thought I was going to have trouble, talking to him one-to-one. But he didn't really have anything that I hadn't really thought about.
No.
But anyway, I'm looking forward to reading that. Another great book, DeMarco's Edinburgh, which is published by a Scottish firm, Luath Press. And that's by Richard DeMarco and Roddy Martin. And what's good about it is that it tells the whole history of the Edinburgh National Festival and the Edinburgh Fringe, and DeMarco's own massive role in both organisations, in both histories, and his role in the British art scene. He was the man who brought Joseph Beuys, the great German artist, to Britain for the first time. It's written by him and Roddy from the inside, and it tells the whole story in detail. So I can't wait for that, to read that. But DeMarco, who we know well, having been one of his parties at Edinburgh National Film Festival in the 1990s, with Jimmy Boyle.
Oh, that's who it was, Jimmy Boyle, wasn't it?
The ex-murderer who wrote A Sense of Freedom, which turned into a big movie. Yeah. It was a party he was at. But so we know about DeMarco. We've been to several of these shows over the years. And he also worked with Jim Haynes, who not only helped to set up Edinburgh Fringe, but also was big in London in the swing 60s, and set up the free arts labs and things like that. And also Mark Boyle, who was another Scotsman who went to London, having been involved in the early years of the Edinburgh Fringe. But Mark Boyle's got a Harrogate link. Mark Boyle, before he became the guy who was a famous modern artist, and also provided the light shows for the UFO Club in Tottenham Court Road for Pink Floyd, etc. Well, before he did all that sort of counterculture stuff, he was quite a straight-laced guy, and he lived in Harrogate above a cafe in the middle of town in the early 60s before he got involved with the arts properly. And it was in Harrogate that he actually got into poetry, which was his first step into the arts. And then he left Harrogate for Paris, and then and the rest is history, as they say. Yeah,
indeed. So that's the books. Impressively.
I'm not gonna
diverse books.
This is going to get tricky to do this.
Not at all. I mean, I might buy CDs. Let's just see, how they went.
How about this one? Shankar Family and Friends from 1974. The famous indie musician did an album produced by George Harrison for George's Dark Horse record label, which has just been remastered and released. And it's a blend of indie music with Western pop and funk and jazz. And it's got Ringo on a couple of tracks and Billy Preston and Tom Scott. So again, that sounds like it'd be interesting. I certainly hope it's better than this other.
So how did that one become a Christmas present, Graham? Because who the hell's going to know?
Well, I suggested that. I do research.
So you do your research. impeccable taste is in fact because it's you who picked them.
Exactly, yeah. So I get it right every time. But I just hope it's better than West Meets East, which came out in 1967, where Yehudi Menuhin, the great violin player of classical music, recorded an album with Ravi Shankar, which I've got in vinyl. I've got an original copy in vinyl from 1967. And I'm not an expert on Yehudi Menuhin, and I'm not an expert on Ravi Shankar, but put them together, and all you get is very skillfully intricate music, which was a little bit dull. So I'm hoping that Shankar Family and Friends is more truly pop and more truly interesting. But it may not be. I don't know. I've never heard of it live.
Well, we'll wait to have that revealed and learn whether your impeccable taste was in fact not.
But how about Brian Ferry's Moon album from 1990?
The reissued album, isn't it?
I mean, my God, it's in a box. It's a 3 CD box, and it's beautifully put together. It's a work of art in itself. It's it's more like a jewelry box than an album. And by the time he did that album, his career was slightly going downhill chart wise, and also his reputation was also downhill because he'd gone from like being art rock with Roxy Music early on, and over the years he got more and more towards middle of the road, more music like. But there's a counter theory that as he disappeared from the world of art rock, he hadn't stopped being art. And what he was doing by becoming more and more mellow or low key was creating a refined strain of high art, which superficially sounded a bit dull, but was actually on a higher plane, a higher level. So that's the theory.
Do you think that time has shown that to be true? Or does indeed
I don't know, again, I've played the main album part of it once and thought, it sounds quite good. But I'm going to play it a lot more.
I mean, the second phase of the dance away phase of Roxy Music, are you saying that is in some way less significant artistically? Just had an absolute commercial sense?
That's what most of the critics say that. But you've got the art rock phase, early Roxy Music. Then you've got Roxy Music turning into a more conventional band.
Yeah.
Roxy Music return after 3 years hiatus. Yeah. And they're much smoother, much more middle of the road. And then as they go along, they get to the final album, Avalon, which is where they start to turn into finely honed landscape, rather like a mountainous peaks and valleys, very, very straight lined. And then you got Brian played from Avalon album and refined it and distilled it into almost nothing till basically his character almost disappeared within the sort of like tapestry. So that's the story. That's the story, supposedly.
I mean, there's another element to him as one of the great covers artists of all time. His singing of "A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall."
That's true. He does do very good.
Jealous guy. That the version there with the whistling. Fantastic. I mean, unimpeachably beautiful interpretations of songs. And then his, of course, if you wanted someone to do the songs of maybe the Noel Coward era or whatever, again, utterly suited his voice.
No, you're right, Charles. When I saw Brian Ferry play at Harrogate National Centre about 2008, I think it was, he did a cover of Dylan's Positively 4th Street.
That's right.
But he did it in the style of sort of like Velvet Underground meets early Roxy Music. And he was absolutely brilliant. So you're right.
Because he did his album, didn't he, of Bob Dylan covers, which again is a case in point.
They weren't all quite as good as that, though.
No. So now, any other last presents that you want to mention that
I've got recommend? So many interesting presents, just as interesting as the ones I've already mentioned. And I'm beginning to think that I should end this now because it's just going to get utterly tedious.
Anyway, Graham, I was indeed always touched by your presence, dear.
Storm, good line. But Storm Garrett sounds like a sort of like terrible actor from bad Hollywood act. My name's Storm Garrett.
Well, no. I think it sounds like someone from Yorkshire. Garrett. That's a Yorkshire expression. Garrett.
Yeah.
Storm Garrett.
All right.
Now, Graham, my ears are still ringing from the sound of rasping Ferrari and Maserati vehicles. I spent my afternoon watching Ferrari at View Cinemas. And you're positing the thought that maybe Michael Mann's new movie, Ferrari, is finally the first great film made about cars. So presumably we're not going to be including the film.
Yeah, but it's a tricky subject
of children's cars. I can't even remember what that film was called now, with lots of children's cars. What was that called?
It was called Cars, wasn't it?
I think it was. Gary Newman could have given a clue on that one. Anyway, Ferrari, freshly in my.
Yeah.
For you, what made it?
What
made it a great film, Graham?
Well, I don't think it was a great film. I mean,
Right.
there's not any. There's great films which feature cars prominently. So
Yes.
you got The Driver from 1978, starring Ryan O'Neal.
Italian
you got Drive
Job.
from. Italian Job, 1969. You got Drive, starring Ryan, directed by Nick Winding Refn, rather. And they're both great films in which cars play a big role, but they're not.
Taxi Driver.
Not because of the story. They're a feature of the story. Whereas the films that are about cars and car drivers, Grand Prix 1966, that John Frankenheimer film starring James Garner, Winning 1969, starring Paul Newman.
What was the Steve McQueen one?
Le Mans 1971 came out.
Yeah.
Well, these are all watchable films, but essentially they're not great films because all films about car drivers and car racing drivers in particular end up being the same story, which is the bloke's obsessed with winning at all costs. His women and family around him are alarmed by this and get treated as second-class citizens, and he flirts with danger and death perpetually. And that's the whole story. So you get to Ferrari, and although it's about a manufacturer of cars rather than a driver,
yes,
you end up back in the same place. The drama comes from the danger of driving, but everybody knows driving is dangerous, so the drama can't possibly go anywhere except towards death. There's no other piece of the story. So then you can rely on the carrying, the dialogue being brilliant, the direction being brilliant, and there being something more to the script than just the dangers of driving fast cars. And Ferrari nearly pulled it off. It nearly managed to have enough life beyond the racing scenes, but it didn't quite. I didn't think. What did you think?
I mean, I've read the review seem to sort of question Adam Driver's, ironically called Driver, is actually he's not really driving in the film. He's a former driver. Seemed to feel that he was rather outacted by Penelope Cruz playing his wronged wife, and I rather would go along with that. But that actually, I think that's one of the things that makes this film. That's where the strength of the film lies. It's that the dynamic of that relationship, and at the same time, of course, Adam Driver's character Enzo Ferrari, who's in charge of the wonderful red, most beautiful and symbolic car in the world, probably the Ferrari, of course. But he has another relationship that is going on at the same time, one of which he hasn't been strictly honest with his wife about. And that dynamic, I think that's what's interesting is how he, as a man, deals with that, how he deals with the drivers under his charge at Ferrari and the ruthlessness that goes with that, and whether actually in the way he conducted his relationships as well was whether a ruthless streak in that or not, or whether actually there was a more humane side to him. What did you feel on that?
Well, I think the script gave him a glimpse. The script was multifaceted. The problem was that Driver's performance played Enzo Ferrari like a monument or a statue with a complete passive face that betrayed very little interior life. Now, if in House of Gucci, Ridley Scott's film about another great Italian, the fashion designer, story except with fashion replay Gucci. It's fantastic. He's totally natural as an Italian. He's got character and personality. It's a brilliant performance. So I can only think the reason that his statue-like performance in Ferrari is down to Michael Mann, who is a great director. Everybody makes mistakes. It's not his fault because he can play Italian pretty damn well. For some reason, Michael Mann wanted him to be totally impassive, which I have no idea why that's the case, but that seems to be what he did, and that undermines the conviction of the film and the believability of the film. At no point does he betray any real emotion. It's
not, yeah,
the director to make in that performance.
Yes, because I mean, the significant late in the film, without doing spoiler alert, but when two different sides to a story of motor racing has happened, one involving a fatal crash, the other actually being triumphant. In the phone call to congratulate the winner, who is from Ferrari, he basically says, "I'm not going to discuss the other side of what's happened. No, I just want to congratulate you." And you think, well, what is that based on? Where, how can Michael Mann be absolutely confident that that is how Enzo Ferrari was? And what point is he trying to make about Enzo Ferrari in doing that? Is it saying that actually, to be as successful as he became, he had to be ruthless in the way that he did it?
Well, what that do is compartmentalize the tragedy of racing, which alludes to several points during the film. There's Adam Driver's performance as Enzo Ferrari, but I think that the key moment in the film is the crash, which is shown in, although it's not a lengthy scene, it's shown in forensic detail, and it's quite horrific. I've never seen a racing crash to look justifiably so horrible as that crash, and it makes the whole film more believable because you suddenly realize that the danger isn't just some cliched storyline you've seen a million times in every other racing driver film that Hollywood's ever come up with. You suddenly realize that this is all real, and it suddenly brings the film alive. And I don't think that Michael Mann or Adam were saying that Ferrari didn't care when he told the winning driver not to think about the crash. I think he said that because these people can't be involved with sport unless they put the dangers and the consequences for human lives to the side. Because if they thought about that stuff, they'd never get in the car. They'd never pay drivers to get in the car. And they'd have to give up concession. So I don't think they were trying to make him look callous. I think that's just that's the nature of the game.
It was very telling, and I do remember actually in the days that they used to have the racing that used to take place in Scarborough at Oliver's Mount, involving motor vehicles and the dangers that went with that, or even actually the racing that used to come through Harrogate, and the thrill of those roaring cars that would park up. There was a real appeal to it. Then you watched it with only straw bales protecting people from being struck by these vehicles, and then of course in the scene that you're referring to, that was even more apparent. And you're right, the way that actually it froze that moment, and you watched that in utter shock as to what happens. But then you do think, well, actually there was something very cavalier about the way that people watched it as well, just standing on the sides, these vehicles going at so fast, and you think, well, why were people not thinking actually there could be a life risk there? Maybe that was the thrill of it all, even for those watching, was such that they would think about their own safety in those circumstances.
It was also it was harder times. You got to remember the Western world's in its time for comfort of the average citizen in the entire history of the Western world.
Yeah,
Recent filming. Back in the 50s and 60s or even earlier, people's expectations were lower, and their ideas of danger, their ideas of suffering were a bit different to now. That just like softly approach to anything in those days. But I have to say that having watched that crash where I think 9 civilians got killed,
5, including 5 children.
If I was involved in that sport at that point in the real world, I couldn't get back in a car or I can't answer a team. I just think a sport worth 9 members of the public dying just isn't.
No, absolutely. Last thoughts on films with cars going fast. Of course, you ignored an entire series of magnificent Vin Diesel films. I don't know how you can't possibly not have mentioned Fast and Furious.
Yeah, but these are not supposed to be serious films. So
really, Graham? You surprised me with that comment. I hadn't realised that.
I would say that I think the House of Gucci, which is about ambition in love, power, corruption and lies, which is pretty much what Ferrari's about as well. I would say that as a film about Italy and about Italian history in that regard, House of Gucci is a better film than Ferrari and Michael Mann.
I think I think that's a fair analysis. I mean, in the heat of having watched the film, I do think it's worth seeing. I think for all that, but I do think you're right. House of Gucci probably is ultimately the more satisfying film. And there are limitations to Ferrari, but I still think it is actually worth seeing. And his story is, of course, perhaps the best. If I'm going to make one last comment on great films or not great films about motor racing or motor racing drivers, there is the wonderful documentary about Ayrton Senna, which if people haven't seen, greatest of documentaries ever made, and is really well worth seeing. And that's a more, again, there was danger in of course there's always going to be danger in motor racing, we know this, but again, the way his life came to an end, and the way he pushed himself to the limit and maybe beyond the limit, as it turns out. Very, very powerful film, and well worth seeing if you haven't seen that before. So, Graham, Christmas, of course, used to be a collective television watching experience in houses when we didn't have that many choices, and it gave birth to the legends of Morecambe and Wise or whatever. Do you still do? I don't know. First of all, do you still would you get Radio Times, and do you still sort of let things stop on Christmas Day to watch Christmas television? Or given that people now, the world of iPlayer and any numbers of ways of being able to watch things other than actually the time they're on live. I mean, do you see Christmas TV as something that's diminishing in its impact?
Yeah, it has been diminishing for a long time. It was always the case that the BBC made a bigger effort at Christmas on TV than ITV or anybody else did. And it still does. It still makes some effort to have good comedies and occasional
Good
dramas.
comedies? Mrs. Brown's Boys, really?
Come on, not going out Christmas special. Come on, you can't do that. Lee Mac. Genius. Actually, it's a guilty pleasure. I love not going out. It's
good description, guilty pleasure. I think we'll let you have that one. Yes, we
terrible.
will.
That's so very funny.
What's it called? Carrying up the midwife, whatever it's called. What's that called?
Yeah, call on the midwife.
Sorry.
ITV provides virtually no special TV programming for Christmas, and then you're in the realms of like Sky and streaming services, which they don't make any more effort than BBC, even though they've got a much bigger budgets for their TV programming than BBC's got. So that's changed. I mean, it's not what it was in the 1970s or earlier. But the other thing that's changed is in my life. In the past, when I used to watch a lot of Christmas television, I had some control over Christmas events and whether people were watching television or not, and if they were watching television, what show they're going to watch. But for a good 20 years or more, wherever I've spent Christmas Day, I've had no influence on how events happen. So if the people around me aren't going to watch television, I can't go like, I insist on watching television on Christmas Day, even though you're watching television. So yeah, I don't see much TV on Christmas Day these days.
No, I mean, I did. I mean, there is one tradition that actually seems to have been sustained. The most watched Christmas television program was?
What was it?
The King's Speech.
Oh yeah, I did see that.
Not the film, but the King's Speech. And so that tradition lived on, and maybe that's because, I mean, that's the 3 o'clock tradition, isn't it? Everything stops for the King's Speech.
Yeah. I watch it not as a loyal subject, more out of curiosity, because you get little interesting bits in these things. So Charles's speech on Christmas Day at 3 p.m. started off very traditional, very serious, very respectful. I thought, ooh, he can try to turn into his mum, which I'm not complaining about. His mum was fine. But then,
off with his head. Off with his head.
As it went on, it became more and more like proper Prince Charles rather than King Charles. Allusions to the planet, lots of allusions to ending war. And I thought, good grief, Charles is like a child of the 60s who's now on the throne. And I was quite surprised. It wasn't totally out there, but for a king's speech or a queen's speech on Christmas Day, it was eventually quite way out.
Well,
was
along
quite
with
surprised.
COP28, it's been his chance to be who he is, not just play a role, but to
Exactly.
actually show what he truly believes in. I didn't see Rishi Sunak's Christmas speech or video. Did you?
Why would I watch that?
That's the one where he's parodying Home Alone and I think and Love Actually, with the Hugh Grant scene, of course, where the lonely Prime Minister, dancing on his own at number 10. I haven't seen that, but I mean, obviously that was that was one alternative Christmas, and of course Stephen Fry did Channel 4 Message. Did you see that one?
I had one bad review. Did you see Stephen Fry?
Yeah.
No, I did not. Did you
Well,
see it, Charles?
it was stoking the fires of Israel and Gaza. So anyway, I do want to know whether you watched Doctor Who or not with our new Doctor Who.
Ooh, I didn't get the chance to see it either. I saw the trailer, which obviously is useless to judge it by. But I was slightly like, I thought this guy looks like a young Eddie Murphy crossed with an action hero, and he smiles the whole time. And I thought, if this was an action hero film in Hollywood, I would think the new Doctor Who would be. But I like Doctor Who to have brains as well as a lot of pizzazz. So I wasn't sure what I was going to think of it, but I didn't see it anyway. Therefore, I cannot.
So that's all based just on the trailer. The danger of a trailer. Well, we shall see, Graham, because I'm sure if you get the chance to watch it, you can make a judgment that may well back up what you've already thought about it. So, Mike, can I make one Christmas recommendation, Graham? If you've never seen Morecambe and Wise at Christmas, go and watch them again, because BBC Two had a whole evening of them, and I've never laughed so much all year.
Yeah, the good thing about Morecambe and Wise, which stands the test of time, is that they're nice people, and they're fun when they're not telling jokes. So they don't require jokes to be enjoyable. It's definitely a good comedian.
Oh, well, on that thought, and saying actually also watch Caroline Aherne, the arena special on Caroline Aherne, which is a beautiful program.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.